Welcome back to another outdoor video here on Writing Done Right, and we want to talk today about getting the fine details right in your novel. Welcome back. I'm Tom Morosky. I'm an author and a technology consultant, and on this channel we will teach you how to get your book, your manuscript, all put together, all wrapped up nicely and into the distribution centers so your customers and readers and followers can buy your book online, or maybe directly from you. But what we want to talk about today is more of a writing tip. Occasionally we like throwing these in, just some thoughts and some ideas. And in this case, I want to talk to you about a free and open source application that I use to gather a little bit of my data. So you want to focus when you're working on a novel, you want everything to be as realistic as possible outside of those intentional places where you suspend reality. The Watchmen commentary on the movie The Watchmen had some interesting analysis of this. You know, he said the world is pretty much the way it is, except each character in The Watchmen was able to suspend a point of reality. You had Rorschach was very much of more like, I don't know if necessarily as much as a superpower, but he was really super good at fighting. Of course, all of them were, but he seemed to have an extra degree of power in that. You had your, was it Adrian was super fast. You had, obviously, Dr. Manhattan, like, super invulnerable. It's like super everything, I guess. Maybe that was everything suspended. But nevertheless, what they look at is you want to be able to suspend one part of reality. Now, what I suspended in Synaptergy is the period of the length of time that research actually takes. And I suspended that so that we can move along with the story and get to the real point and the real action point. But all of the other things that I needed to do in that all had to be accurate. For example, Mark goes out and he visits his friend in the sky, who is whom but Orion. Well, Orion is only visible at a certain time, at a certain period of the year, from a certain direction. I had to make sure that I knew what those fine details were. And so I have some background in some astronomy type things. I used to work in a planetarium, but I can't say it's necessarily a strong suit. But there's an application called Stellarium. And Stellarium is an open source application that gives you these wonderful, beautiful, highly customizable star charts. And so I was able to map out what time of the day Orion is out, which allowed me to work on the backstory to make sure he's visiting Orion at the time of the day, at the time when that particular constellation is in the sky. But also I need to know the direction and the orientation of his house, because if the direction and orientation of the house is not correct, he would not be able to go out on his back porch and look at Orion in the sky. So I used an application called Stellarium in order to figure that out. Now you can use these different applications, or in many cases you want to find people who can help you. So in this book, Sam has a background working on building the circuitry components for robotics. Well, it turned out that one of my beta readers, and I didn't know this until they told it to me, one of my beta readers actually had done that type of work and said, hey, you have a little bit of an error in how this type of work is done. And so he was able to give me enough information, it was a she actually, was able to give me enough information where I could go back in and I could patch it up and then send just that section of the story back and say, hey, is this more accurate as to this? Now, I had thought I had it right because I had a friend that also did that kind of work, but it wasn't quite the advanced level as Sam was in this particular story. And so my beta reader was able to help me out and fix the errors that I had. So what are some of the areas we need to look at? Oh, another one, the plants along the road. There is in the printed book, this is corrected. In the audiobook is still an error. I called mustard, garlic mustard is a plant. I had a background in herbology and I forgot garlic mustard has a white flower, not a yellow one. The audiobook, there's a little error and it says the yellow flowers of the garlic mustard. Oops, garlic mustard has white flowers. But by the time I realized the error, I did not want to go back through and have to redo a portion of the audiobook, so I went ahead and left that as yellow. But for those people that listen to the audiobook and want to correct me because you know something about the plants, you're right, I goofed up, but it's corrected in the printed and the ebook editions because those were corrected before they get sent out to the printers. But you want to make sure, and this is an important one for me because as I studied herbology, there's a movie out there called The Cure, which had Brad Renfro and Joseph Mazzello were friends, and they're looking for a cure for AIDS. And in the movie, at one point in time, they watched, what's the film with Sean Connery? I can't remember it now. There's a lot of them, but you'll know what I'm talking about, where they're like, hey, they get the idea to try plants to cure AIDS. And so they're trying all these different plants. And the one plant that they picked out and said, oh, if this thing's not from a bayou, there's some National Enquirer about a cure for it and a plant in a bayou, whatever. And they're like, if this isn't a plant from the bayou, I don't know what is, And they're, of course, this plant ends up being poisonous, sends the kid to the hospital. The problem is that's a bull thistle. And a bull thistle is not only is it not poisonous, it is a survival food. And so it causes a hinge in the story of the film to anybody who actually understands the plant. So you want to make sure things are correct. Family details are another one. You want to make sure you have your family stories straight, to the point where I have entire family stories and histories and backgrounds on all of the characters, even if it was something that did not show up in the story. You want to make sure that you know this. It prevents you from having accidental whoopsie errors in timelines, particularly if it's a series and it's going to go on. You don't want our character to have a brother in the first book, but only a sister in the third book. You want to make sure that you understand some of these. The best example of this I can think of is Adventures in Odyssey, children's Christian program. And they have a catalog of known errors on the program. People like Donna Barkley seem to grow up, but Connie Kendall's been 16 forever, which actually they use that as a play on some of the play on the skits with that throughout. Also, you had situations like what's Lucy's last name, because they used two different names accidentally. They had to figure out how to clear that up. A lot of little errors like that can show up as related to family details. Now, in terms of this book, getting your computer terms accurate. I'm in the writers network that I'm a part of. There's one person who's writing a story, and this kid has an iPad and keeps on doing I-pad. I'm like, no, you have to get this right. If you don't get this right, then it's going to cause serious problems for the people who understand the technology. I have to keep on correcting it. We had the same thing with COVID. I'm like, no, it's not the COVID-19 virus. Stop saying that. It's the SARS-CoV-2 virus. COVID-19 is the name of the illness. You have to get these things right if you are actually using them in your books or in your stories, particularly if it's more of a non-fiction type approach. So, of course, in Synaptergy, I use a lot of Linux and open source software, of course, having a background in that. And so I make sure that, what distribution would a programmer use? What desktop environment would a programmer use? Which isn't necessarily the one that I personally would use. I use Linux Mint and Cinnamon, but a programmer at a robotics lab would probably be using Debian with GNOME. So that's why I gave him Debian with GNOME. I gave him things like the Atom Editor, which is more likely what he would be using to do some of his programming. Not a particular one that I like, but I want to make sure that I'm using things that are more consistent for the field. These are those fine details that will kind of put the final nail in the coffin as a good story or a bad story, as a well-researched story or a not well-researched story. So the point is that anytime you have an intersection with reality, unless it's a point where you're specifically suspending reality, you want to make sure that you are accurate in everything that you are doing. Now, of course, I mentioned Synaptergy throughout this several times. You can find the link to Synaptergy in the description down below. It is on the screen here, synaptergy.com or tlm.li/s. You can find Synaptergy over there. Hopefully this video helped you out. Let me know if it did, and leave me your thoughts and your comments and your accuracies or goofs in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. I hope that we have taught you how to get your writing done right.